Notorious for their hate crimes, these KKK members couldn't conceal their emotions as the judge handed down a shocking verdict. Number 1. Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William Bryan. In southern Georgia, a 25-year-old man, Ahmaud Arbery, was conveniently shot to death by 3 white males. The men claimed that Arbery was responsible for several robberies in their neighborhood and saw him running from one when they intercepted him. The Arbery trials were among the most closely watched proceedings in America since the April murder conviction of Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer who was responsible for the death of an unarmed black man, George Floyd. It was around 1 p.m. when Gregory McMichael saw Arbery go past his front yard. McMichael believed Arbery was the same man who had traumatized the whole neighborhood with several break-ins and called out to his son, Travis McMichael. The men grabbed a .375 Magnum handgun and a shotgun, got into a pickup truck, and began chasing Arbery. Arbery could have never imagined how the day would unfold when he stepped out of his home that morning. A neighbor, William Bryan, joined the McMichaels in their pursuit until they finally stopped Arbery in his tracks. Wait until you hear how the white supremacists narrated the incident. McMichael claimed that Arbery attacked the group violently and he shot at the black man in self-defense. However, the cell phone video, shot by Bryan, revealed what actually happened. Arbery was running along a shaded 2-lane residential road when he came upon Travis McMichael and his white truck. Travis held a shotgun while Gregory, his father, stood in the pickup bed with a handgun. Arbery can be seen trying to run away from the men, briefly disappearing from view. Arbery emerged fighting with Travis, and suddenly 3 shotgun blasts were heard. The wounded man tried to run, but stumbled and fell to the ground. Now, this is where the case gets more twisted. Gregory McMichael, who is a former Glynn County police officer and an investigator with the local district attorney's office, had many friends who tried to conceal the truth in an attempt to save him. He wasn't arrested for 2 months after fatally shooting a man to death, but his freedom was short-lived. Can you imagine the people's reaction when they saw the video of Arbery's shooting? The footage caused massive uproar across America and raised concerns about the safety of people of color at the hands of white supremacists. Fortunately, justice was served when the jury determined that Ahmaud Arbery's murder was motivated by racism, and all 3 suspects were convicted of a federal hate crime. Despite their connections with the police department and judiciary, both father and son were sentenced to life in prison for the pursuit and slaying of Arbery, and Bryan was condemned to 35 years in prison. If you thought the shooting in Georgia was the epitome of brutality, the next hate crime will leave you stunned. Number 2. Jeremy Christian. This is Jeremy Christian, another white male who went a little too far in his hate for minorities. Christian is responsible for taking 2 innocent lives and destroying a 3rd one forever. It all began when a drunk Christian hopped aboard the MAX train and began yelling at 2 teenage girls, one wearing a hijab. A man, Namkai Meshi, approached Christian while trying to record this tirade on his phone, but Christian threw his phone onto the train's floor and pushed Namkai Meshi and Fletcher, another passenger, away. Fletcher responded by shoving Christian a few times, telling him to get off the train, and that's when things got out of hand. Can you imagine what happened next? Christian pulled out a knife and stabbed Fletcher, Namkai Meshi, and Best, who had done nothing but stand near him. Mika Fletcher survived his wounds, but unfortunately, the ride turned into a nightmare as 23-year-old Namkai Meshi and 53-year-old Ricky Best lost their lives on the train. In a video, Christian can be seen getting off the train right after the incident, showing no remorse for his actions. On the contrary, he threatened other bystanders before escaping the scene. Some people from the train station followed Christian, and one even saw him washing the blood off his hands with soda. The authorities quickly apprehended the murderer before he could get away, and that marked the beginning of an emotional trial that shocked audiences. Throughout the trial, Christian maintained he was not guilty of the stabbings and blamed Fletcher for the incident. Can you imagine what was going on in Christian's mind when he boarded the train Emotions raged high in the courtroom, where the victim's family took the stands and pleaded with the judge to never let Christian walk free in society again. The attack survivor Fletcher also expressed how his life and perspective had changed forever after the incident. When the jury's verdict was read out, Christian was in another room in the courthouse because he had threatened one of the victims to make a statement by screaming that he wished he'd killed her. He probably just made the jury's job easier by showing his true colors during the trial. Christian was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of ever getting out. Although he looked teary-eyed, he refused to accept his heinous hate crime and called his trial a farce and the jury's verdict laughable. Coming up next is a crime so ruthless it will give you nightmares. Number 3. Russell Courtier. Russell Courtier mowed down a 19-year-old Lionel Bruce Jr. in his girlfriend's Jeep after the two got into a fistfight outside a 7-Eleven in August 2016. What made matters worse was Bruce's African-American ethnicity and Courtier's involvement with a white supremacist prison gang, European Kindred. The crime was clearly motivated by racial hate, a fact Courtier's attorneys tried very hard to conceal, but the videos that surfaced after the incident erased any doubts the jury might have had about Courtier's reasons. The night of the unfortunate incident, Bruce can be seen calmly standing outside the convenience store when Courtier pulls up in a Jeep. A fight suddenly broke out, and Bruce tried to get away from Courtier as he got back into his Jeep and started chasing him. Bruce's murder ignited a significant uproar in the African-American community and displayed how a few white supremacists believed their hate was more important than human life. Courtier's racism was hard to hide throughout the trial. The sentencing was marked with anger and grief as Bruce's biological mother, father, and stepmother spoke in court. However, he remained silent when allowed to make a statement. Bruce's stepmother was unmoved by Courtier's tears.
He had a lot of love. He had a lot to give. He had a future, and it was taken away at the hands of somebody who was taught hate.
Courtier was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 28 years. Until he was eligible for release. The next case proves that racism continues to be America's Achilles heel and that white supremacy is a part of several households. Number 4. Dylann Roof. Dylann Roof was sentenced to death for the murders of 9 black church members during a Bible study in Charleston, South Carolina. When Roof entered the historic Emmanuel AME Church, no one could have imagined he was carrying a concealed Glock 45 gun. There were 12 God-fearing church members inside that welcomed a 13th person with a kind word, a Bible, a handout, and a chair. Roof sat with the Bible study group for almost 45 minutes, and just when everyone closed their eyes for the final prayer, he started shooting. Can you imagine the horrific scene he must have left behind? Roof even stood over some of the fallen victims and shot them repeatedly as they lay on the floor. He wanted to kill them all, but luckily, out of the 12 members present that day, 3 survived to tell the tale. The church shooting sent waves of shock across the black community, and they rallied together to fight for the rights of African Americans in the country. When the jurors asked Roof why he committed such a heinous crime, he gave them no explanation. However, his FBI confession revealed he hoped to bring back segregation or spur a race war. Roof was convicted of 33 federal charges, including murder and hate crimes, and the jury condemned him to execution after a 3-hour deliberation. Can you believe he was the first to face execution for a federal hate crime conviction in South Carolina? When the verdict was read out, Roof remained stoic and showed no remorse for his actions. Sometime earlier, he told the court he wasn't sure what good it would do to ask for a life sentence instead of execution. He was clearly unmoved by the massacre he had caused and the lives he had destroyed forever. These white supremacists transcended all boundaries of racial hate, and if you think their behavior was shocking, you'd never believe how these nasty cops reacted to their sentencing.